Jamal Carter checked his watch as he walked through the glass doors of Sterling Tech Solutions. He was 15 minutes early for his interview. That was exactly how he planned it. He always arrived early to important meetings. It showed respect and gave him time to calm his nerves. The lobby was impressive. White marble floors stretched across the entrance. Modern art hung on the walls. A large fountain bubbled near the reception desk. Everything looked expensive and professional. Jamal smoothed down his navy blue suit jacket. He had bought it specially for interviews like this one. His shoes were polished until they shined. His portfolio was tucked under his arm. "Good morning," he said to the receptionist.
I am Jamal Carter.
"I have an interview at 10 o'clock. The receptionist smiled and typed something into her computer. "Yes, Mr. Carter, please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Jamal sat in one of the leather chairs and looked around. Other people walked through the lobby. Most wore expensive suits. Everyone seemed busy and important. This was the kind of place Jamal wanted to work. Sterling Tech Solutions was one of the best recruitment firms in Atlanta. They placed high-level candidates in major tech companies. Getting a position here would open many doors. He thought about his journey to this moment. Growing up in a small apartment with his mother and two sisters had not been easy. Money was always tight, but his mother pushed him to study hard. She worked 2 jobs to make sure he had everything he needed for school. When he got accepted to MIT, she cried tears of joy. Now, 12 years later, he had a degree from one of the best schools in the country. He had worked at 3 major tech companies. He had built systems that saved millions of dollars. He had spoken at conferences. His resume was strong. "Mr. Carter?" Jamal looked up. 2 people stood in front of him. A man and a woman. Both were white and in their 40s. The man was tall with graying hair and an expensive suit. The woman had blonde hair pulled back tight and wore a dark dress. Neither one was smiling. "Yes, that is me," Jamal said. He stood and extended his hand. The man shook his hand briefly. His grip was weak. "I am Derek Walsh. This is Christine Moore. We will be conducting your interview today." "Nice to meet you both," Jamal said. He turned to shake Christine's hand, but she was already walking away. "Follow us," Derek said. They walked through the main office floor. Jamal could see dozens of employees working at their desks. The space was open with glass walls separating different areas. Everyone could see everyone else. Derek and Christine led him to a conference room with glass walls. Inside was a long table with chairs. Large windows showed the city skyline. "Have a seat," Christine said. Her voice was cold. Jamal sat down and placed his portfolio on the table. Derek and Christine sat across from him. They whispered something to each other. Derek smiled slightly. Christine looked at Jamal like she was studying an insect. "So," Derek began. He leaned back in his chair. "Jamal Carter. Says here you went to MIT." "Yes, sir. I graduated in 2015 with a degree in computer science and engineering." Derek nodded slowly. "MIT, that is impressive. Tell me, was that an affirmative action situation or did you actually earn your way in?" Jamal felt his stomach tighten. He had heard questions like this before. He kept his face calm. "I earned a full academic scholarship based on my test scores and grades. I graduated with honors." Christine flipped through his resume. "And these jobs you have listed? TechFlow Industries, DataCore Systems, Neuralink Solutions. Did these companies hire you for your skills or were they trying to fill quotas?" The question hit Jamal like a slap. He took a breath before answering. "I was hired because I am good at what I do. At TechFlow, I developed an algorithm that reduced processing time by 40%. At DataCore, I led a team of 12 engineers on a major project. At Neuralink, I built a system that saved the company $2 million every year." "Sure," Derek said. He did not sound convinced. "Anyone can claim they did those things." "I brought examples of my work," Jamal said. He opened his portfolio. "I can show you the code and explain the technical details." Christine waved her hand. "That will not be necessary right now. Tell us about where you grew up." "What neighborhood are you from?" Jamal hesitated. "I grew up on the south side, near Cascade Road." Derek and Christine exchanged a look. Derek raised his eyebrows. Christine smirked slightly. "Cascade Road," Derek repeated. "That is a rough area, is it not?" "Parts of it can be challenging," Jamal said carefully. "But my mother worked hard to provide a good home for us. She taught me the value of education and hard work." "I am sure she did," Christine said. Her tone suggested she did not believe him. But coming from that kind of background, do you think you can really fit in with the professional culture here? Our clients are CEOs and executives. They expect a certain level of sophistication. Jamal felt anger rising in his chest. He pushed it down. I have worked with executives and CEOs for years. I have presented to boards of directors. I have spoken at international conferences. I know how to conduct myself professionally. Through the glass walls, Jamal noticed some office workers looking toward the conference room. A woman at a nearby desk had stopped typing. She was watching them. Another man stood by the water cooler, his eyes on the meeting. "Let me ask you this," Derek said. He leaned forward. "Can you actually code, or do you just talk a good game? Because we have seen a lot of candidates who look impressive on paper but cannot deliver." "I can show you right now," Jamal said. He pulled out his laptop. "I brought examples of projects I have completed. I can walk you through the code line by line." Christine sighed loudly. "We do not have time for that. We have other candidates to see today." But Jamal was already opening his laptop. He pulled up a complex program he had written. "This algorithm processes customer data and identifies patterns. It helped my previous company target their marketing more effectively. The code is efficient and well documented." Derek glanced at the screen but barely looked at it. "Very impressive. But we need more than just one example." More employees were watching now. Through the glass, Jamal could see at least 10 people looking at the conference room. Some were whispering to each other. A young black woman at a desk looked upset. She said something to the man next to her. "How about your references?" Christine asked. "Who can vouch for you?" "I have letters from my previous supervisors," Jamal said. He pulled papers from his portfolio. "Dr. Sarah Chen from MIT also wrote a recommendation. She's the one who suggested I apply here. She said Sterling Tech was a great company." Derek took the papers but did not read them. "Dr. Chen, sure, we will take a look at these later." The interview continued for another 10 minutes. Every answer Jamal gave was met with doubt or dismissal. Derek and Christine made jokes between themselves that Jamal could hear. When he explained a technical achievement, they asked if someone else had done the actual work. When he mentioned awards he had won, they suggested the awards were given for diversity reasons rather than merit. Through the glass walls, more and more employees were paying attention. The office had gone quieter. People were not hiding their stares anymore. Some looked angry. Others looked uncomfortable. A few shook their heads. Jamal kept his composure. He answered every question with patience and detail. But inside he felt humiliated. He had walked into this building with hope and confidence. Now he felt small and disrespected. This was not about his qualifications. This was about the color of his skin. Finally, Derek stood up. "Well, Mr. Carter, I think we have heard enough. We will review your application and get back to you." Christine stood as well. "Honestly, I think we are going in a different direction. Your resume looks a bit exaggerated and we have concerns about cultural fit." Jamal slowly closed his laptop and gathered his papers. He stood and looked both Derek and Christine in the eyes. "Thank you for your time. But I should tell you something. I came to this interview as a courtesy. Dr. Chen spoke highly of this company, but I already have 3 other job offers. One of them is from TechVantage Solutions." Derek's face changed slightly. TechVantage was Sterling Tech's biggest competitor. "I came here because I was interested in what Sterling Tech could offer," Jamal continued. His voice was calm but firm. "I can see now that this is not the right place for me." He picked up his portfolio and walked toward the door. As he opened it, he turned back. "I hope you both have a good day." As Jamal walked through the office toward the exit, he felt dozens of eyes on him. Some people looked sympathetic. Others looked ashamed. The young black woman who had been watching gave him a small, sad nod. He was almost to the lobby when something happened behind him. He heard the clicking of high heels on the marble floor. A voice called out, "Excuse me, could someone tell me what is going on?" Jamal turned. A black woman in an elegant business suit had entered the office. She looked powerful and important. The receptionist rushed over to her, looking nervous. Several employees immediately stood straighter. One man's face went pale. The woman's eyes scanned the office and landed on the glass conference room where Derek and Christine still stood. Her expression hardened. The woman who had just entered was Patricia Hughes. She was the regional director for Sterling Tech Solutions. She managed 5 offices across the Southeast. People respected her and feared her in equal measure. She had built her career on excellence and fairness. She did not tolerate failure, and she definitely did not tolerate discrimination. Patricia had been overseas for 2 weeks on business. Her flight had landed early that morning. She was not supposed to be back in the office until tomorrow, but she wanted to check on things. She liked to make surprise visits. It kept people on their toes. Now, as she walked through the main office, she could feel the tension in the air. Something was wrong. Employees looked nervous. Some were gathered in small groups, whispering. Others pretended to work but kept glancing at the glass conference room. Patricia followed their eyes. Inside the conference room, she saw Derek Walsh and Christine Moore. They were talking to each other and laughing. Derek looked pleased with himself. Christine was putting papers into a folder. Through the glass, Patricia could see a well-dressed black man walking toward the lobby with a portfolio under his arm. His face was calm, but she recognized the look. She had seen it before. It was the face of someone who had just been treated badly but was holding it together. Ms. Hughes. The receptionist rushed over. "We were not expecting you until tomorrow." "Plans changed," Patricia said. Her eyes stayed on the scene before her. "Who is that man leaving?" "That was a candidate. He just finished an interview with Mr. Walsh and Ms. Moore." Patricia walked closer to one of her senior employees, a woman named Jennifer. "What happened in that interview?" Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Hughes, it was not good." "Tell me." Jennifer glanced around and lowered her voice. "They were really hard on him. Harder than normal. I could hear some of it through the glass. They questioned whether he really went to MIT, asked if he was an affirmative action admission. They asked about quotas. It went on for almost 30 minutes. A lot of us were watching because it was so uncomfortable." Patricia's jaw tightened. "How long ago did the interview start?" "Maybe 25 minutes ago." Patricia looked back toward the lobby. The candidate was gone now. She turned and walked straight toward the conference room. Her heels clicked loudly on the floor. Employees moved out of her way. Everyone knew that walk. Someone was about to get in serious trouble. She reached the conference room and knocked firmly on the glass door. Through the window, she saw Derek and Christine's faces change. First confusion, then recognition, then pure panic. Patricia opened the door and stepped inside. "Derek, Christine, Ms. Hughes." Derek stood up quickly. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. "We did not know you were back. How was your trip?" "My trip was fine," Patricia said. She closed the door behind her. "Who was the candidate that just left?" Christine glanced at Derek. "Just someone who applied for the senior technical position. His name was Jamal Carter." "And?" Patricia crossed her arms. "What was your assessment?" Derek cleared his throat. "Not a good fit. His qualifications looked exaggerated. We had doubts about whether he could handle the professional level we require. We decided to pass on him." "I see." Patricia walked to the table and picked up the folder. She opened it and looked at the resume inside. Her eyebrows rose. MIT graduate, 12 years of experience, publications in technical journals, speaking engagements at major conferences, projects that saved millions of dollars. She looked up at them. "This looks exaggerated to you?" "On paper it looks good," Christine said quickly. "But in the interview he just did not seem right. You know how it is. Sometimes you can just tell when someone is not going to work out." "What questions did you ask him?" Derek and Christine looked at each other. "Standard interview questions," Derek said. "Background, experience, technical skills." "Did you ask him if his MIT admission was due to affirmative action?" The color drained from Derek's face. Christine's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Did you ask if his previous employers hired him to fill quotas?" Patricia continued. Her voice was cold and controlled. "Did you question whether he could fit into a professional culture because of where he grew up?" "Ms. Hughes, I can explain," Derek started. "Did you or did you not ask those questions?" Silence filled the room. Through the glass walls, Patricia could see the entire office watching. No one was even pretending to work now. "We were just being thorough," Christine finally said. Her voice was weak. "We wanted to make sure he was really qualified." "You were being thorough," Patricia repeated slowly. "With a candidate who has better qualifications than half the people we have placed this year. You questioned his achievements. You doubted his abilities, and multiple employees witnessed it through these glass walls." Derek tried to recover. "Ms. Hughes, we have placed hundreds of candidates. We know what we are doing. This one just did not meet our standards." Patricia set down the folder and looked at both of them. I want you both to stay here. Do not leave this room. Do not talk to anyone. I will be back shortly. She left the conference room and walked directly to Jennifer's desk. I need you to write down everything you saw and heard during that interview. Be specific. Yes, Miss Hughes, Jennifer said. Patricia moved through the office, quietly asking other employees who had witnessed the interview to do the same. One by one, they wrote statements. A young man named Marcus said he heard Derek make the affirmative action comment. A woman named Lisa saw Christine questioning Jamal about quotas. Another employee heard them discussing Jamal's neighborhood in a mocking way. Patricia collected the statements. Her anger grew with each one, but she kept her face neutral. She had learned long ago that emotion was less effective than cold, hard facts. She went to her office and made several phone calls. One was to the head of human resources. Another was to the company's legal department. The third was to the CEO. Each conversation was brief and professional. When she finished, she had all the authority she needed. Patricia returned to the conference room. Derek and Christine sat in silence. They both looked worried now. The confidence from earlier was completely gone. Here is what is going to happen, Patricia said as she closed the door. I have been investigating complaints about this office for the past 3 months. Several candidates of color have reported negative experiences during their interviews, but until now we did not have enough concrete evidence. Most of the complaints were about feelings and impressions. Nothing we could prove. She placed the stack of employee statements on the table. Today you both conducted a discriminatory interview in a glass room in front of dozens of witnesses. Multiple employees have provided written statements about what they saw and heard. This is no longer about vague feelings. This is documented discrimination. That is not fair, Derek said. His voice rose. We treat everyone the same. We have high standards. If this candidate could not meet them, that is not our fault. Patricia opened the folder again. Jamal Carter is not just qualified. He is exceptional. He has published research papers on artificial intelligence. He has spoken at international tech conferences. The algorithm he developed for neural link solutions is being used as a model by other companies. And you told him his resume looked exaggerated. She turned to Christine. You asked him if he was hired to fill quotas. You questioned whether he could fit into professional culture. You doubted every achievement he mentioned. Christine's eyes filled with tears. I was just trying to be thorough. We get so many applicants who look good on paper but cannot perform. Except you do not ask white candidates if their MIT degrees were affirmative action admissions, Patricia said. You do not question whether white candidates were quota hires. I have reviewed recordings of other interviews you have both conducted. You save those questions exclusively for candidates of color. Derek stood up. This is ridiculous. We have brought millions of dollars in placements to this company. We have excellent track records. You cannot judge us based on one interview. Sit down, Patricia said quietly. Her tone made it clear this was not a request. Derek sat. Your placements are under review. Patricia continued. HR is pulling data on every candidate you have interviewed in the past 2 years. We will be looking at demographic patterns in who you rejected versus who you approved. We will also be reaching out to candidates who complained about their experiences. You cannot do that, Christine said. I can, and I am. Patricia placed her hands on the table and leaned forward. You both are suspended effective immediately. You will surrender your company phones, laptops, and access badges to security. You will not contact any clients or candidates. You will not speak to other employees about this situation. HR will contact you within 48 hours about the investigation process. This is unfair, Derek said again. But his voice had lost its strength. We were just doing our jobs. Your job was to evaluate candidates fairly based on their qualifications, Patricia said. Instead, you used your positions to humiliate someone because of his race. That is not doing your job. That is discrimination, and it ends now. She walked to the door and opened it. 2 security guards stood outside. Please escort Mr. Walsh and Ms. Moore to collect their personal items from their desks. Then see them out of the building. Derek and Christine stood slowly. Christine was crying openly now. Derek's face was red with anger and embarrassment. As they walked out of the conference room, every employee in the office watched. Some faces showed satisfaction. Others showed shock. A few looked worried, wondering if they might be next. Patricia watched them leave. Then she turned to Jennifer. I need you to find contact information for Jamal Carter. I need to speak with him as soon as possible. Yes, Ms. Hughes, he left his phone number on the application. Patricia went to her office and sat at her desk. She felt exhausted. Situations like this always drained her. She had fought against discrimination her entire career. She had faced it herself many times when she was younger. She had climbed to her current position by being twice as good as everyone else. And she had promised herself that if she ever had power, she would use it to create fairness. She picked up her phone and dialed Jamal's number. It rang 3 times before he answered. Hello? Mr. Carter, this is Patricia Hughes. I am the regional director at Sterling Tech Solutions. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Jamal sat in his car in the parking garage. His hands were shaking slightly. The interview had been worse than anything he had experienced in years. He had dealt with subtle bias before. Most black professionals had. But Derek and Christine had not even tried to hide it. They had questioned everything about him. They had treated him like he did not belong. His phone rang. He did not recognize the number, but it had the same area code as Sterling Tech. For a moment he considered not answering. But curiosity won. Hello? Mr. Carter, this is Patricia Hughes. I am the regional director at Sterling Tech Solutions. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Jamal's mind raced. Regional director. That was high up. Yes, I can talk. First, I want to apologize for what you experienced today. I witnessed part of your interview from outside the conference room. I also spoke with employees who saw and heard more. What Derek Walsh and Christine Moore did was completely unacceptable. It does not represent the values of this company. Jamal did not know what to say. He had expected to never hear from Sterling Tech again. Thank you for saying that. I need to ask you some questions about the interview, Patricia continued. I have statements from witnesses, but I want to hear your account directly. Are you comfortable discussing what happened? Yes, Jamal said. He took a breath. They questioned whether I really earned my way into MIT. They asked if my previous employers hired me to fill quotas. They made comments about my neighborhood and whether I could fit into professional culture. Every answer I gave, they doubted. When I tried to show them my work, they dismissed it. Did they say anything else? Anything you remember specifically? Jamal thought back. Derek asked if I could actually code or if I just talked a good game. Christine said my resume looked exaggerated. Near the end, they said they were going in a different direction and had concerns about cultural fit. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Mr. Carter, I know this experience was terrible, but I want you to know that Derek and Christine have been suspended. They are being investigated. Based on what I have learned today, they will likely be terminated. That is fast, Jamal said. He was surprised by how quickly things had moved. Discrimination is not something we take lightly, especially when it happens in front of witnesses. Patricia paused. I would like to meet with you in person. Not about the job you originally applied for. I want to discuss something different. Are you available to come back to the office? Jamal hesitated. The last thing he wanted was to return to that building. Can I ask what this is about? I want to offer you a consulting position. We need someone to help us fix the problems in our recruitment system. Someone who understands what went wrong and can help us do better. I think you would be perfect for it. Jamal was stunned. You want me to work with Sterling Tech after what just happened? I know it sounds strange, but real change requires people who have experienced the problems firsthand. Your expertise would be valuable, and frankly, the company needs to prove we are serious about fixing this. Having someone like you lead the effort would show that commitment. I need to think about it, Jamal said. Of course, take all the time you need, but would you be willing to meet with me this afternoon? Just to hear more details? No commitment required. Jamal looked at his watch. It was almost noon. I can come at 2 o'clock. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I will see you then. After the call ended, Jamal sat in his car for a long time. His emotions were mixed. Part of him wanted nothing to do with Sterling Tech, but another part was intrigued. The regional director had acted quickly and decisively. She seemed genuine, and the chance to actually fix the problems he had experienced was appealing. Back at Sterling Tech, Patricia was not done. She called a meeting with all employees in the office. Everyone gathered in the main conference area. People looked nervous. Office drama was one thing, but having the regional director address everyone was serious. Patricia stood at the front of the room. She looked at each face. Some people could not meet her eyes. By now you all know what happened this morning, she began. Derek Walsh and Christine Moore conducted an interview that was discriminatory and unprofessional. Multiple people witnessed it. Derek and Christine have been suspended pending investigation. A few people shifted uncomfortably. One man in the back looked down at his shoes. I want to be clear about something, Patricia continued. This is not just about Derek and Christine. This is about the culture we have allowed to develop in this office. Some of you saw warning signs before today. Some of you heard comments that made you uncomfortable. Some of you may have even made similar comments yourselves. The room was silent. Starting today, things are going to change. We will be reviewing our recruitment processes. We will be implementing mandatory training. And we will be examining patterns in how we evaluate candidates. If anyone has concerns about discrimination they have witnessed or experienced, I want you to report it to HR. You can do so confidentially. A woman near the front raised her hand. It was Jennifer. Ms. Hughes, some of us did notice things before, but we did not know how to report it. Derek and Christine brought in a lot of money for the company. We thought management would not care. Patricia nodded. That is a fair concern, and it points to a bigger problem. Revenue should never be more important than doing the right thing. Derek and Christine did bring in placements, but if those placements came at the cost of discriminating against qualified candidates, then they were not successes. They were failures. Marcus, the young man who had witnessed the interview, spoke up. What happens to candidates who Derek and Christine rejected? Some of them might have been treated the same way. HR is pulling records of all interviews conducted by Derek and Christine over the past 2 years, Patricia said. We will be looking at demographic data. If we see patterns of bias, we will reach out to those candidates and offer them new interviews. What about the rest of us? Another employee asked. How do we make sure we are not making the same mistakes? That is exactly why we are implementing training, Patricia said. But more than training, we need to create a culture where discrimination is not tolerated, where people feel safe speaking up, where we evaluate candidates based on their qualifications, not our assumptions. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes. Patricia answered questions and listened to concerns. By the end, some employees looked relieved. Others looked worried about their own behavior being examined. But everyone understood that change was coming. After the meeting, Patricia went to her office and began making calls. The first was to the head of HR. I need you to pull all interview records for Derek Walsh and Christine Moore for the past 2 years, Patricia said. I want demographic data on every candidate they interviewed. I want to see who was rejected and who was approved. I want to know if there are patterns. That will take time, the HR director said. You have 48 hours. The next call was to the company's legal team. We need to prepare for potential lawsuits from candidates who were discriminated against. Pull all complaint records related to this office. I want to know how many people reported problems and what was done about it. The legal team promised to have a report by the end of the week. Patricia's final call was to several candidates who had complained in the past about their interview experiences at Sterling Tech. She personally apologized to each one. She explained what had happened and invited them to come back for new interviews. Most were surprised. Some were skeptical. But a few agreed to return. At 2 o'clock, Jamal arrived back at Sterling Tech. The receptionist recognized him and immediately called Patricia. Mr. Carter is here. Ms. Hughes, send him to my office. Jamal walked through the main office again. He noticed people looking at him differently this time. There was respect in their eyes. A few people nodded at him as he passed. The young black woman from earlier gave him a smile. Patricia's office was on the top floor with windows overlooking the city. She stood when Jamal entered and shook his hand firmly. Thank you for coming back, she said. I know that was not easy. I am curious about what you have to say, Jamal said honestly. They sat down and Patricia explained her vision. Sterling Tech needed to completely overhaul its recruitment practices. They needed someone who understood technology, understood discrimination, and could design better systems. The pay would be significantly higher than the position he originally applied for. It would be a consulting contract so he could keep his other job offers if he wanted. The work would take about 6 months. Why me? Jamal asked. You just met me this morning. Because you experienced the problem firsthand, Patricia said. Because your qualifications show you can think systematically about complex problems. Because you handled yourself with dignity in a terrible situation. And because I think you actually care about making things better. Jamal thought about his mother. She had faced discrimination her whole life. She had worked twice as hard for half the recognition. She had taught him to push through barriers but also to fight for change when he could. "I need a few days to think about it," he said. "Take a week," Patricia said, "but I hope you will say yes. Sterling Tech needs this, and I think you might find it meaningful work." As Jamal left the building, he felt different than he had that morning. The anger and humiliation were still there, but now there was something else. Possibility. Over the next few days, news of the incident spread beyond Sterling Tech. The tech community in Atlanta was small. People talked. Some employees at Sterling Tech told friends at other companies what had happened. The story grew with each retelling. Derek and Christine became minor celebrities in the worst way possible. Other recruiters heard what they had done. Some defended them, saying the whole thing was blown out of proportion. But most were quiet. No one wanted to be associated with discrimination. Derek tried to reach out to colleagues at other companies looking for job opportunities. Most did not return his calls. When he finally got an interview at another firm, they asked him directly about what happened at Sterling Tech. He tried to spin the story, claiming he had been unfairly targeted. But the other company had already heard the truth from multiple sources. They passed on hiring him. Christine had a harder time emotionally. She kept replaying the interview in her mind. At first she was angry. She felt she had been treated unfairly. But as days passed and she spoke with a therapist, she began to understand what she had done. The shame was overwhelming. She had hurt someone. She had let her biases control her actions. She had been cruel. Meanwhile, Patricia was working around the clock. The data from HR came back and it was damning. Over 2 years, Derek and Christine had interviewed over 300 candidates. White candidates were approved at a rate of 62%. Black candidates were approved at a rate of 19%. Hispanic candidates at 23%. Asian candidates at 35%. The pattern was clear and undeniable. Patricia presented the data to the CEO and the board of directors. She recommended that Derek and Christine be terminated immediately. She also recommended reaching out to every rejected candidate of color to offer new interviews. And she recommended bringing in an outside consultant to help reform their processes. The board approved everything. 1 week after the interview, Jamal called Patricia. "I have made my decision," he said. "I will take the consulting position." Patricia smiled. "I am glad. When can you start?" "Monday." Jamal's first day as a consultant at Sterling Tech was strange. He walked through the same doors where he had been humiliated just a week earlier. But this time, people greeted him with respect. Patricia had sent an email to the entire office explaining his role. He was there to help them become better, to fix what was broken. Patricia met him in the lobby. "Welcome back. I know this must feel odd." "It does," Jamal admitted, "but I am ready to work." She led him to a private office that would be his for the next 6 months. It had a desk, computer, and windows overlooking the city. "This is your space. You have full access to our systems, HR records, and interview data. You can talk to anyone in the company. You have my full support." Jamal set down his bag and looked around. "Where do I start?" "Wherever you think is most important," Patricia said. "But I suggest starting by understanding the full scope of the problem. Talk to employees. Look at the data. Then we can make a plan." Over the next week, Jamal did exactly that. He interviewed employees one by one. Some were honest about what they had witnessed. Others were defensive. A few admitted they had made similar mistakes themselves. Jennifer, who had been one of the witnesses, was particularly helpful. "I have worked here for 5 years," she told Jamal. "Derek and Christine were not the only ones with problems. They were just the most obvious. A lot of people here have biases they do not even realize." "Can you give me examples?" Jamal asked. "Sure, like how we talk about cultural fit. That phrase gets used to reject people who do not look or sound like the majority of employees. Or how we evaluate confidence. When white candidates are assertive, we call it leadership potential. When candidates of color are assertive, we say they seem difficult or not a team player." Jamal took notes. These were patterns he had suspected but needed confirmation about. He also reviewed the data that HR had compiled. The numbers were worse than he expected. Beyond Derek and Christine, there were patterns across the entire office. Candidates with ethnic-sounding names got fewer callbacks. Candidates who attended historically black colleges were rejected more often, even with strong qualifications. Women of color faced the steepest barriers of all. Jamal created a presentation showing all of this data. He presented it to Patricia and the senior leadership team. Some executives looked uncomfortable. One man tried to argue that the patterns could be explained by other factors. Jamal calmly walked through the statistical analysis, showing that even when controlling for education, experience, and qualifications, the bias remained clear. "This is not about bad people," Jamal said. "This is about bad systems. Systems that allow bias to hide in subjective judgments. Systems that reward people for finding candidates who fit in rather than candidates who are qualified." Patricia nodded. "So what do we do?" "We redesign everything," Jamal said. "Starting with how we screen resumes." He proposed a blind review system. When resumes first came in, they would be processed to remove names, addresses, and photos. Reviewers would only see education, experience, and skills. This would reduce name-based discrimination. Some recruiters pushed back. "How can we evaluate culture fit without knowing who the person is?" one asked. "That is exactly the point," Jamal said. "Culture fit should not be about demographics. It should be about values and work style, and we should only evaluate that after we know someone is qualified." Next, Jamal redesigned the interview process. He created structured questions that every candidate would be asked. This would make it easier to compare candidates fairly. He trained interviewers on how to recognize and counter their own biases. And he implemented a panel system where multiple people interviewed each candidate and compared notes. The training sessions were not easy. Jamal did not sugarcoat things. He showed video clips of real interviews where bias was obvious. He made people role-play difficult situations. Some employees complained that the training was uncomfortable. Jamal's response was simple. "Good. Growth is uncomfortable." While Jamal worked on fixing the system, the fallout from Derek and Christine's actions continued. HR finished its investigation, and the results were sent to both of them in formal letters. They were being terminated for cause. This meant no severance packages, no positive references. Their time at Sterling Tech was over. Derek was furious. He called a lawyer and tried to fight the termination. His lawyer reviewed the evidence, witness statements, demographic data showing patterns of discrimination, and company policies that Derek had violated. After 2 days, the lawyer told Derek the truth. "You do not have a case. The evidence against you is overwhelming. If you try to sue, the company will countersue for damage to their reputation. You will lose and probably owe them money." Derek hung up on the lawyer. He spent the next week sending angry emails to former colleagues, claiming he was being scapegoated. Most people did not respond. A few told him to move on. One person was blunt. "Derek, you messed up. Everyone knows it. Stop making it worse." Finding a new job was harder than Derek expected. The recruitment industry was small. Word traveled fast. When he applied to other firms, they searched his name online. Stories about the incident had leaked to professional forums. Some articles did not name Derek directly, but enough details were there that people in the industry could figure it out. After 3 months, Derek still had not found a comparable position. He was running out of money. His confidence was shattered. Finally, he took a job at a small consulting firm doing administrative work. It paid half what he made at Sterling Tech. Every day felt like a reminder of what he had lost. Christine's experience was different. The termination hit her hard, but differently than it hit Derek. She felt genuine shame. She could not stop thinking about Jamal's face during that interview. The dignity he maintained while she tore him down. The way he had still tried to show his work even when they dismissed him. She started seeing a therapist to deal with her guilt. In their sessions, she talked about her upbringing, her assumptions, and the casual racism she had absorbed without questioning it. The therapist helped her understand that awareness was just the first step. Real change required action. One evening, Christine did something Derek never did. She found Jamal's professional email and wrote him a message. It took her 3 hours to write. She deleted and rewrote it multiple times. Finally, she sent it. "Mr. Carter, my name is Christine Moore. I was one of the recruiters who interviewed you at Sterling Tech. I am writing to apologize for my actions that day. There is no excuse for how I treated you. I let my biases control my judgment. I made assumptions based on race instead of evaluating your qualifications fairly. I was cruel and unprofessional. I do not expect forgiveness, I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong. I am working with a therapist to understand my biases and do better. If you have any advice on how I can make amends beyond this apology, I would be grateful to hear it. I understand if you do not want to respond. Sincerely, Christine Moore. Jamal read the email twice. His first instinct was to delete it, but something about the tone made him pause. It did not sound like someone trying to protect themselves. It sounded like genuine remorse. He waited 2 days before responding. Ms. Moore, I appreciate your apology. What happened was hurtful, but I recognize that people can change if they are willing to do the work. If you are serious about making amends, I suggest you use your experience to help others. Volunteer with organizations that help underrepresented groups enter the tech field. Mentor young professionals of color. Use your knowledge of recruitment to help people navigate systems that might be biased against them. That would be meaningful action. Jamal Carter. Christine read his response and cried, not from sadness but from gratitude. He had given her a path forward. She immediately started researching volunteer opportunities. Within a week, she had signed up with 2 organizations that helped prepare minority candidates for tech interviews. She would teach them what recruiters looked for, how to present their qualifications, and how to handle difficult questions. Back at Sterling Tech, Jamal's reforms were being implemented. The blind resume review system went live. Within the first month, the callback rate for candidates with ethnic-sounding names increased by 40%. When recruiters could not see names, they evaluated qualifications more fairly. The new interview system was harder to implement. Some recruiters complained it took too much time. Others said structured questions felt too rigid. But Patricia backed Jamal completely. We are doing this, she told her team. If you cannot adapt, you cannot work here. Slowly, people adjusted. And something interesting happened. The quality of hires improved. When recruiters could not rely on gut feelings about culture fit, they focused more on actual skills and experience. They asked better questions. They listened more carefully to answers. Jamal also created a system for tracking outcomes. Every candidate who went through the new process was asked to rate their experience. The scores started improving immediately. Comments changed from complaints about bias to praise for professionalism, but not everyone was happy. Sterling Tech had some clients who preferred the old way of doing things. One client called Patricia to complain. Your new system is taking too long. We need candidates fast. We do not care about all this bias stuff. Just send us people who fit. Patricia's response was firm. If speed is more important to you than fairness, then we are not the right recruitment firm for you. I suggest you work with someone else. The client was shocked. Companies did not usually talk to clients that way. Are you really willing to lose our business over this? Yes, Patricia said. We are. The client hung up. Patricia knew this would happen. Some clients would leave, but she believed the company would ultimately be stronger for it. And she was right. Within weeks, new clients started reaching out. Companies that had heard about Sterling Tech's reforms and wanted to work with a firm that took discrimination seriously. 3 months into his consulting work, Jamal was asked to speak at a company-wide meeting. Patricia wanted him to share results with everyone. Jamal was nervous but prepared a presentation. He stood in front of 200 employees spread across 5 offices via video conference. When I first came to Sterling Tech, he began, it was not under good circumstances. I experienced discrimination that was painful and humiliating. I could have walked away and never looked back. But Patricia Hughes gave me an opportunity to turn that negative experience into positive change. He clicked to his first slide showing the data. These numbers show what we were doing wrong, but they also show how much we have improved. Our callback rates for minority candidates are up. Our interview satisfaction scores are higher. And most importantly, we are hiring better candidates across all demographics. The next slide showed retention data. The candidates we hire through the new system are staying longer and performing better. This is not just good ethics, this is good business. Marcus, the young employee who had witnessed Jamal's original interview, raised his hand. Do you think we have fixed all the problems? No, Jamal said honestly. Bias is deep. It takes constant work to fight it. But we have built better systems. And systems matter. They cannot eliminate bias completely, but they can reduce it significantly. After the presentation, employees came up to thank Jamal. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others asked questions about how they could improve their own practices. A few minority employees thanked him for making the workplace feel safer. That evening, Patricia took Jamal out for dinner to celebrate. "You have done remarkable work," she said. "We have done remarkable work," Jamal corrected. "You gave me the authority and support to make real changes. Most companies would have just done some symbolic training and moved on. I have seen too much discrimination in my career to settle for symbolic gestures," Patricia said. "Real change is hard. It requires commitment from the top. But it is worth it." As they talked, Jamal's phone buzzed. It was an email from one of the candidates who had been rejected by Derek and Christine 2 years earlier. Sterling Tech had reached out to her for a new interview. She had come back, gone through the new process, and was being offered a position. Her email was simple. "Thank you for what you did. This feels different. This feels fair." Jamal showed the email to Patricia. She smiled. "That is why we do this work." 4 months into the transformation, Sterling Tech looked very different from the company where Jamal had been humiliated. The changes went beyond just interview processes. The entire culture was shifting. Jamal had implemented monthly reviews where the recruitment team analyzed their own data. They looked at which candidates they called back, who made it to final interviews, and who got offers. The numbers were displayed publicly. This created accountability. If a recruiter's numbers showed bias patterns, everyone knew. At first, this transparency made people nervous. Some recruiters worried about being called out. But Jamal explained it differently. "This is not about punishment. This is about awareness. We all have biases. The question is whether we are willing to see them and work on them." He created mentorship pairs where recruiters worked together to check each other's blind spots. If someone was consistently rating candidates from certain backgrounds lower, their partner would flag it. They would discuss why. Often the recruiter did not realize they were doing it. Maria Santos was one of these recruiters. She had worked at Sterling Tech for 8 years and considered herself fair and open-minded. But when Jamal showed her the data on her candidate evaluations, she was shocked. She had rejected 70% of Hispanic candidates over the past year, compared to 30% of white candidates with similar qualifications. "I do not understand," Maria said. She looked genuinely confused. "I did not think I was doing that." Jamal sat with her and reviewed several interviews. He pointed out patterns in her notes. Hispanic candidates were often described as not confident enough or communication issues for the same behaviors that white candidates were praised for as thoughtful or careful. Communication style. Maria put her head in her hands. "I came from a Hispanic family. My parents immigrated here. I worked so hard to fit in, to lose my accent, to sound more professional." She looked up at Jamal. "I think I was judging these candidates by the same harsh standards I judged myself, looking for proof they could fit in the way I learned to fit in." "That is internalized bias," Jamal said gently. "It happens. The important thing is recognizing it and changing." Over the next month, Maria worked hard to counter her biases. She used the structured questions Jamal had created. She reminded herself to evaluate answers objectively. Her callback rates for Hispanic candidates improved significantly. She also started volunteering to mentor young Hispanic professionals, helping them navigate interviews with confidence. Stories like Maria's were happening throughout the company. People were confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves. It was not easy work. Some people resisted. A few recruiters quit, saying the new system was too strict and they could not work that way. Patricia let them go without trying to convince them to stay. "If they are not willing to do this work, they do not belong here," Patricia told Jamal. Meanwhile, Sterling Tech was reaching out to candidates who had been rejected under the old system. Jamal had identified over 50 candidates of color who had strong qualifications but were passed over. Each one received a personal email from Patricia apologizing and inviting them back for a new interview. Not everyone responded. Some had already taken other jobs and were happy where they were. Others were too hurt or angry to trust Sterling Tech again. But about 20 people agreed to return. One of them was a woman named Lisa Kim. She had interviewed with Derek 2 years earlier for a senior analyst position. Derek had told her that her English was good but not quite professional enough, even though Lisa had been born in America and spoke perfect English. She was rejected despite having a master's degree and 6 years of relevant experience. When Lisa came back for a new interview, she was paired with a panel of 3 interviewers. None of them were Derek or Christine. They asked her about her analytical skills, her approach to problem solving, and her experience with data systems. They did not mention her name, her appearance, or make any assumptions about her background. At the end of the interview, Lisa felt respected. When Sterling Tech offered her the position a few days later, she accepted. Her first day was emotional. She walked past the conference room where Jamal had been interviewed. She thought about her own experience and how different things were now. Jamal met with Lisa during her first week. "Thank you for giving us a second chance," he said. "Thank you for creating a place where I can actually succeed based on my work," Lisa responded. The improvements were not just internal. Sterling Tech's reputation in the professional community was changing. Word spread that they had seriously addressed their discrimination problems. Tech companies started specifically requesting Sterling Tech because they wanted access to diverse talent pools. Patricia presented the results to the board of directors 6 months after Jamal started. "Our placement numbers are up 23%. Our client satisfaction scores are the highest they have been in 5 years. We have placed more diverse candidates in 6 months than we did in the previous 3 years combined, and our candidates are staying in their positions longer, which means we get more repeat business." One board member raised a concern, "But we lost some clients who did not like the new process. Do we not need to worry about that?" Patricia was ready for this question. "We lost 3 clients. We gained 15 new ones. The clients we lost were ones who explicitly told us they did not care about fair hiring practices. Those were not clients we wanted anyway. The new clients we gained specifically sought us out because of our reputation for finding qualified, diverse candidates." Another board member asked about costs. "These new processes must be expensive. All that training, the new systems, the time spent on structured interviews." Jamal answered this one. "The upfront costs were significant, but we are already seeing returns. Better hiring means less turnover. That saves money on recruitment and training. Diverse teams bring different perspectives, which leads to better solutions for clients. That brings in more business, and avoiding discrimination lawsuits saves millions in potential legal costs." The board approved Patricia's request to make Jamal's consulting work permanent. They wanted to expand the reforms to all Sterling Tech offices across the country, and they wanted Jamal to lead that effort. But Jamal had mixed feelings. He had accomplished what he set out to do. The Atlanta office was transformed. Systems were in place. People were trained. But he also missed the technical work he had done before. The coding, the algorithm design, the pure problem-solving of software engineering. He talked it over with Patricia. "I am proud of what we built here, but I do not think this is my long-term career. I am an engineer at heart." Patricia understood. "You have given us an incredible gift. The work you have done will continue long after you leave, but I respect that this might not be your calling forever." They reached a compromise. Jamal would work part-time with Sterling Tech for another 6 months, training people who could continue the work. He would help expand the reforms to other offices, but he would also go back to his technical career, accepting a position at one of the companies that had originally offered him a job before the Sterling Tech incident. As Jamal trained his successors, he realized how much he had learned. He had come to Sterling Tech as a victim of discrimination. He was leaving as someone who understood the systems that allowed discrimination to thrive and how to dismantle those systems. One of his trainees was Aisha Thompson, a black woman who had worked at Sterling Tech for 7 years. She had watched Derek and Christine's behavior for years, but never felt empowered to speak up. Now she was being trained to become the director of inclusive recruitment. "I never thought I would have this opportunity," Aisha told Jamal during one of their training sessions. "I always felt like I had to keep my head down and not make waves." "That is what happens in toxic cultures," Jamal said. "People who could make things better stay quiet because they do not think anything will change. But you have seen that change is possible. Now you can help make sure it continues." Aisha was nervous about the responsibility. "What if I cannot do as good a job as you?" "You will do a different job than me," Jamal said. "But that is good. You know this company better than I ever will. You have been here longer. You have seen the problems from the inside. Use that knowledge." He taught her everything he had learned: how to analyze demographic data for bias patterns, how to design structured interview questions, how to train people to recognize their own assumptions, how to push for change even when people resisted. By the time Jamal's contract was ending, Aisha was ready. She had already started implementing improvements in the other Sterling Tech offices. The resistance was similar to what Jamal had faced in Atlanta, but she handled it well. She had learned from watching him. One morning, Jamal arrived at the office to find a surprise. The entire Atlanta team had organized a goodbye celebration. There was cake, coffee, and heartfelt speeches. Jennifer spoke about how the office culture had changed for the better. Marcus talked about feeling proud to work at Sterling Tech again. Lisa Kim thanked Jamal for giving rejected candidates a second chance. Patricia presented Jamal with a plaque. It read, "To Jamal Carter, who turned injustice into transformation. Your work here will impact thousands of lives. Thank you for your courage and your vision." Jamal was moved. He looked around the room at faces of all different backgrounds. People who were thriving in an environment that had been hostile just months earlier. "This was never just about me," he said. "It was about all of us deciding that we could do better. That we should do better. I am grateful Patricia gave me this opportunity. But the real credit goes to everyone who was willing to change." As the celebration continued, Jamal stepped out onto the balcony for a moment alone. He thought about that day 6 months earlier when he had walked into Sterling Tech for an interview. How angry and hurt he had felt walking out. How close he had come to just moving on and forgetting about it. But he had not moved on. He had come back. He had done the hard work of transformation. And now dozens of people had jobs they might not have gotten under the old system. Hundreds of candidates would be treated fairly in future interviews. The impact would ripple outward in ways he could not even measure. His phone buzzed. It was an email from someone named David Martinez. "Mr. Carter, I heard about the work you did at Sterling Tech. I am a hiring manager at a tech company dealing with similar issues. Would you be willing to consult with us?" Jamal smiled. The work was not over. It would never be completely over. There would always be more companies that needed to change, more systems that needed reform, more people who needed to be convinced that fairness was possible. But for now, he had done what he came to do. He had turned a moment of humiliation into a movement for change, and that was enough. The next week, Jamal started his new position as a senior engineer at TechVantage Solutions, the company that had been Sterling Tech's biggest competitor. It felt good to be back to writing code and solving technical problems, but he kept his connections to Sterling Tech. He checked in with Aisha monthly. He advised on difficult situations. He stayed involved. 3 months after leaving, Jamal received an award from the Atlanta chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers. It was for his contributions to creating more equitable hiring practices in the tech industry. Patricia and Aisha attended the ceremony along with several employees from Sterling Tech, including some of the diverse candidates who had been hired through the new system. In his acceptance speech, Jamal talked about his mother. "She taught me that when you face injustice, you have 2 choices. You can let it break you or you can use it to fuel change. I chose change, but I could not have done it alone. It took a leader like Patricia Hughes who was willing to take action. It took employees who were willing to examine their own biases. It took candidates who were willing to trust us again after being hurt. Change is never one person's work. It is always a collective effort." After the ceremony, a young black man approached Jamal. He was a college student studying computer science. "I heard your story," the student said. "It inspired me. I was thinking about avoiding the tech industry because I heard it was hostile to people who look like me. But seeing what you did, seeing that change is possible, it gives me hope." Jamal put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "The industry still has problems. There is still work to do. But there are also people fighting to make it better. Be one of those people, and remember your presence in these spaces is important. You belong here." As Jamal drove home that night, he thought about the journey from that conference room with Derek and Christine to this moment. The pain of that interview would never fully go away, but it had been transformed into something meaningful, something that mattered. He had not just survived discrimination, he had fought back against it. He had built systems to prevent others from experiencing what he experienced, and those systems would continue working long after he moved on to other things. That, Jamal realized, was the real victory. 1 year after the incident, Sterling Tech Solutions held a company-wide meeting. Patricia Hughes stood at the front of the auditorium in the Atlanta headquarters. 500 employees from offices across the Southeast joined in person or by video. This was the annual review meeting where the company shared its performance and future direction. Patricia clicked to her first slide. The title read, "1 Year of Transformation, What We Learned and Where We Are Going." Exactly 1 year ago, Patricia began. Something happened in this office that forced us to face an uncomfortable truth. We had allowed discrimination to exist in our recruitment practices. 2 employees were terminated for their actions. But they were not the only problem. The entire system had failed. The room was silent. Everyone remembered that day. Some had witnessed it. Others had heard about it. A few had participated in the changes that followed. Patricia clicked to the next slide showing demographic data. These numbers tell our story. 1 year ago, we were placing diverse candidates at rates far below their representation in qualified candidate pools. Today, our placement rates match or exceed demographic availability. This is not about lowering standards. This is about finally evaluating candidates fairly. The next slide showed client satisfaction scores. They had increased by 31%. Revenue was up 23%. Employee satisfaction scores had improved across all demographics, but especially among employees of color who previously felt undervalued. We did not do this alone, Patricia said. She clicked to a slide with Jamal's photo. Jamal Carter came to us as a candidate and experienced terrible discrimination. He could have sued us. He could have destroyed our reputation publicly. Instead, he gave us a chance to do better. He designed the systems that transformed this company. And today I want to publicly thank him for that gift. The room erupted in applause. Jamal was sitting in the 3rd row. He had been invited as a guest. He stood and nodded to acknowledge the recognition. The applause continued for almost a minute. Patricia introduced Aisha Thompson, who had taken over as Director of Inclusive Recruitment. Aisha was nervous but prepared. She walked to the front and connected her laptop to the projector. When Jamal started his work here, Aisha said, I was skeptical. I had been at Sterling Tech for 7 years. I had seen many diversity initiatives come and go. They usually involved a training session or 2, some posters about inclusion, and then everything went back to normal. I did not think this would be different. She clicked to her first slide. But this was different, because we did not just talk about change. We built systems that made bias harder to hide. Aisha walked through the blind resume review system, the structured interviews, the demographic tracking, and the accountability measures. She showed examples of how these systems caught bias that people did not even know they had. The most important thing we learned, Aisha said, is that good intentions are not enough. We all think we are fair. But data shows our blind spots. Systems force us to confront those blind spots. She told Maria Santos's story without using her real name, how a Latino recruiter had unknowingly been harshest on other Latino candidates, how awareness and structured processes helped her change. That recruiter is now one of our best at placing diverse talent, Aisha said, because she did the hard work of examining her own biases. The next section of the meeting featured testimonials. Lisa Kim, who had been rejected years ago and then hired under the new system, spoke about her experience. The difference was night and day. In my first interview, I felt like I had to prove I belonged in this country even though I was born here. In my second interview, I felt like they cared about my skills and experience. Nothing else. A white employee named Tom Patterson spoke next. I will be honest. When these changes started, I thought they were unnecessary. I thought we already hired fairly. But then I saw the data. I saw the patterns I had not noticed before. And I realized that just because I never experienced discrimination did not mean it was not happening. These reforms made me a better recruiter. I evaluate candidates more carefully now. I ask better questions. And the candidates I place are succeeding at higher rates. Marcus, the young black man who had witnessed Jamal's interview, was now leading a mentorship program for diverse candidates. I used to feel alone here, he said, like I had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good. But the culture has changed. We have hired so many talented people of color over the past year. I do not feel isolated anymore. And younger professionals are seeing Sterling Tech as a place where they can actually thrive. After the testimonials, Patricia revealed the next phase of the plan. Sterling Tech was creating a consulting division specifically focused on helping other companies improve their hiring practices. Aisha would lead it. They would teach other organizations the systems that had worked at Sterling Tech. We learned these lessons the hard way, Patricia said. We made mistakes. We hurt people. But we also learned how to fix those mistakes. Now we want to help others avoid going through what we went through. The announcement generated excitement in the room. Several employees immediately volunteered to be part of the consulting team. They wanted to spread the changes beyond Sterling Tech, but not everything had been perfect over the past year. Patricia acknowledged the challenges. We lost some clients who disagreed with our approach. We had employees quit because they did not want to adapt. Change is difficult and not everyone embraces it. She also addressed concerns about speed. Some people worry that our structured processes take longer. And they do, but they produce better results. We would rather take an extra week to find the right candidate than make a quick hire that does not work out. The meeting concluded with a question and answer session. Employees asked about expanding the reforms, handling resistant clients, and measuring long-term impact. Patricia and Aisha answered each question with data and examples. After the official meeting ended, there was a reception. Jamal found himself surrounded by people wanting to thank him or ask questions. A young Latina woman named Sophia approached him. "Mr. Carter, I was hired 3 months ago through the new system. I just want you to know that this is the first job where I felt judged on my abilities and not my accent." An older white man named Robert shook Jamal's hand. "I have been in recruitment for 30 years. I thought I knew everything, but your system showed me I had blind spots I never knew about. Thank you for that humility." Jamal appreciated their words, but he kept redirecting credit. "The systems are only as good as the people using them. You all did the hard work of changing." Later in the evening, Jamal sat with Patricia in her office. They looked out over the city as the sun set. "Do you ever think about Derek and Christine?" Patricia asked. "Sometimes," Jamal admitted. "I wonder if they learned anything." Patricia had kept tabs on both of them. Derek had eventually found work at a small firm outside the recruitment industry. He was making about half his previous salary. He had never publicly acknowledged what he did wrong. In private conversations with former colleagues, he still claimed he was treated unfairly. "Some people never learn," Patricia said sadly. "Derek is too proud to admit his mistakes. He will probably carry that bitterness for the rest of his life." But Christine was different. After volunteering with organizations that helped minority candidates, she had discovered a new sense of purpose. She was working with a nonprofit that provided free interview coaching to underrepresented groups. She had started a blog sharing what she learned about her own biases and how she was working to change. It was not a popular blog, but it was honest. "Christine reached out to me last month," Patricia said. "She wanted to know if there was any way she could contribute to what we are doing here. I told her no, not because I do not believe in second chances, but because she needs to do her own work elsewhere. This company needs to move forward without her." Jamal agreed. "Some bridges cannot be rebuilt, but I'm glad she's doing something positive." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Patricia asked, "Do you have any regrets about how you handled everything?" Jamal thought carefully. "I regret that it had to happen at all. I regret that other people probably went through similar experiences before mine finally led to change. But do I regret taking the consulting position and doing this work? No. It was one of the most meaningful things I have ever done." "It was brave," Patricia said. "Most people would have just taken their other job offers and moved on. My mother always said that when you have the power to make things better, you have a responsibility to try. I had that power because you gave me the opportunity. I could not walk away from it." Over the next few months, Sterling Tech's consulting division started taking clients. Their first was a mid-sized tech company that had been sued for discrimination. The company wanted to change but did not know how. Aisha led a team that assessed their practices, identified problems, and implemented solutions similar to what Sterling Tech had done. The work was challenging. The tech company had executives who resisted change. They had employees who did not think discrimination was a real problem. They had systems that had been in place for decades. But Aisha used the playbook Jamal had created. She showed data. She built accountability. She trained people. Slowly, the company began to change. Jamal stayed connected as an advisor. He would review data analyses, suggest improvements to systems, and occasionally speak to client companies about his experience. He did this work for free because it mattered to him. His main job at TechVantage Solutions paid well. This consulting work fed his soul. One evening, Jamal received a LinkedIn message from a stranger. The message was from a young black woman named Kendra, who had just accepted a job offer from a company that Sterling Tech had consulted with. "I wanted to thank you," she wrote. "I do not know if you remember me, but I interviewed at Sterling Tech 2 years ago. Derek Walsh told me I was not qualified. It destroyed my confidence. I almost gave up on tech careers. But then I heard about the changes at Sterling Tech and companies you were helping. I applied to one of those companies and had the best interview experience of my life. I start next month. Thank you for turning your pain into something that helped people like me." Jamal stared at the message for a long time. He had never met Kendra. He had not known about her interview with Derek, but his work had reached her anyway. It had given her another chance. That was the power of systemic change. "It helped people you would never meet," he wrote back. "Congratulations on your new position. You earned it through your qualifications and hard work. I am glad you did not give up. The tech industry needs talented people like you. Do not let anyone make you doubt your worth again." 2 years after the incident, Jamal was invited to speak at a national conference on diversity and technology. The conference hall was packed with hundreds of people. He stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. Faces of all different backgrounds stared back at him. "I want to tell you about the worst job interview of my life," Jamal began. He described that day at Sterling Tech in detail. The questions, the doubts, the humiliation. As he spoke, he saw people in the audience nodding. They had experienced similar things. "But this story is not just about that terrible interview," Jamal continued. "It is about what happened next. It is about a leader who chose action over avoidance. It is about employees who did the uncomfortable work of examining their biases. It is about systems that forced fairness even when humans forgot to be fair." He shared the data showing Sterling Tech's transformation. He talked about the candidates who got second chances. He discussed how the changes had spread to other companies through the consulting work. "Here is what I learned," Jamal said. "Discrimination is not usually about evil people with hateful intentions. It is about systems that allow bias to hide. It is about assumptions that go unchallenged. It is about people who are not bad, just unaware." He clicked to his final slide. It showed a pyramid with 3 levels. Systemic change requires 3 things. First, awareness. You cannot fix problems you do not see. Second, accountability. People need to face consequences for discriminatory behavior, and they need systems that force them to confront their biases. Third, leadership. Change only happens when people in power make it happen and stick with it when things get hard. The audience gave him a standing ovation. During the question period, people asked practical questions about implementing similar changes in their organizations. Jamal shared specific strategies. He emphasized that every organization was different and would need customized solutions, but the core principles were universal. After his speech, dozens of people approached him. Hiring managers wanted advice. Diversity officers wanted to partner with Sterling Tech's consulting division. Candidates wanted to thank him for giving them hope. One man stood to the side waiting until others had finished. When the crowd finally thinned, he approached Jamal hesitantly. "Mr. Carter, my name is Derek Walsh." Jamal froze. He had not seen or spoken to Derek since that day in the conference room 2 years earlier. Derek looked different, older, more tired. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a plain button-down shirt and khakis. "I know you probably do not want to talk to me," Derek said. His voice was quiet. "But I wanted to say something. I listened to your speech. I heard about all the good that came from that day. And I realized something. I was given so many chances to be better. People complained about me before. I knew I had biases, but I was arrogant. I thought I was right and everyone else was being too sensitive." Derek's voice cracked slightly. "I lost everything because of my actions. My job, my reputation, my confidence. For a long time, I was angry about it. But listening to you today, I understand what I did. I hurt you. I hurt others before you, and I probably would have kept hurting people if I had not been stopped." Jamal did not know what to say. He had imagined confronting Derek many times, but he had never imagined Derek apologizing. "I do not expect forgiveness," Derek continued. "I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. And I am sorry, truly sorry." Jamal took a breath. "Thank you for saying that. It took courage to come here and tell me this. It is the least I could do." Derek started to walk away, then turned back. "One more thing. The work you are doing, helping companies change their systems, it matters. I wish someone had forced me to face my biases before I hurt so many people. If your systems had been in place when I was recruiting, maybe I would have learned earlier. Maybe I would have caused less damage." After Derek left, Jamal sat down. He felt exhausted, but also somehow lighter. He had not needed Derek's apology to move forward. He had already done that. But there was something meaningful about Derek finally taking responsibility. 3 years after the incident, Sterling Tech published a report on their transformation. The numbers were remarkable. They had helped 23 other companies implement similar systems. Over 1,500 candidates of color had been hired by companies using Sterling Tech's consulting services. Discrimination complaints had dropped to almost zero across all Sterling Tech offices, but the report also acknowledged ongoing challenges. Bias does not disappear, the report stated. It requires constant vigilance. We still catch discrimination in our systems, but now we have tools to identify it and address it quickly. The report included interviews with employees, candidates, and clients. Lisa Kim, now a senior analyst at Sterling Tech, said, "I wake up every day grateful to work here, not because it is perfect, but because people actually try to be fair. When problems arise, they are addressed rather than ignored." Tom Patterson, the white recruiter who had been skeptical at first, said, "These systems made me better at my job. I place higher quality candidates. I have fewer placements fall through. And I feel good about the work I am doing." Aisha Thompson, who had expanded her role to Vice President of Inclusive Talent Acquisition, said, "Jamal gave us a roadmap, but we had to walk the path ourselves. Every company that wants to change must do the same. You cannot buy solutions off the shelf. You have to build them for your specific culture and challenges." The report ended with a message from Patricia Hughes. 3 years ago, we failed a candidate named Jamal Carter. That failure could have destroyed our company. Instead, Mr. Carter gave us a chance to transform. We took that chance seriously. Today, Sterling Tech Solutions is stronger, more profitable, and more fair than we have ever been. But we will never be finished. The work of building equitable systems is never done. It is a commitment we renew every single day. Jamal kept a copy of the report on his desk at TechVantage Solutions. He looked at it sometimes when he felt discouraged. It reminded him that change was possible, that systems could be reformed, that pain could be transformed into purpose. He thought about all the people whose lives had been changed by the work that started in that glass conference room. Candidates who got fair chances, employees who learned to see their blind spots, companies that became better versions of themselves. It was not just about him. It had never been just about him. But he had been the catalyst. He had chosen not to walk away. On the 3rd anniversary of his terrible interview, Jamal received an email from Sterling Tech. It was an invitation to an event honoring people who had contributed to the company's transformation. Jamal, Aisha, Patricia, and several employees and candidates would be recognized. Jamal attended the event with his mother. She had never stopped working her 2 jobs, even though Jamal made enough money now to support her. "I like working," she always said. "Keeps me young." As they walked into Sterling Tech's headquarters, Jamal's mother squeezed his hand. "I am so proud of you. Not just for your career, but for what you did here. You made the world a little more fair." "You taught me how to do that," Jamal said. "You always told me to stand up for what is right even when it is hard." The event was small and tasteful. No long speeches, just genuine gratitude. Patricia presented Jamal with an award. "This man," she said, "showed us that victims of injustice do not have to remain victims. They can become agents of change." Jamal Carter changed our company, but more importantly, he changed how we think about solving discrimination, not through blame and punishment alone, but through systems that make fairness the default option. In his brief acceptance remarks, Jamal spoke to the young professionals of color in the room. "What happened to me should not have happened. But it did, and when it did, I had to make a choice. I could have let it destroy my confidence. I could have become bitter. Instead, I chose to believe that change was possible. I hope each of you makes the same choice when you face injustice. Do not accept it, but also do not let it define you. Use it as fuel to make things better." As the evening ended, Jamal stood in the lobby of Sterling Tech. He looked at the same fountain, the same marble floors, the same modern art he had seen 3 years earlier. But everything felt different. The building had not changed. He had changed. The company had changed. The systems had changed. A young black woman walked through the doors. She was dressed professionally and carried a portfolio. She looked nervous but determined. She walked to the reception desk and said, "Good morning. I am here for an interview." The receptionist smiled warmly. Welcome to Sterling Tech. Someone will be with you shortly. Jamal watched the scene and smiled. That young woman would face a fair interview. She would be evaluated on her qualifications. She would be treated with respect. That was his legacy, not awards or recognition, but the simple fact that other people would not have to experience what he experienced. He walked out of the building into the afternoon sunlight. His mother was waiting by the car. As they drove away, Jamal looked back one more time at Sterling Tech Solutions. The building stood tall against the blue sky. Inside, people were working to build more fair systems. Some of them were people he had trained. Others were people inspired by the transformation. Together, they were creating something better. Jamal turned forward and looked at the road ahead. There was more work to do. More companies that needed help. More candidates who deserved fair chances. More systems that needed reform. The fight against discrimination was not over. It would probably never be over. But at least now he knew change was possible. He had seen it. He had built it. And others were carrying it forward. That knowledge gave him hope. And hope, Jamal had learned, was the most powerful force for change in the world.